You're listening to Pitch Talks, bringing you the game.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Pitch Talks, the sports career show recently positioned as the fourth most popular career podcast in the UK. Today's episode is going to have a bit of everything as we welcome Rebecca Lucy Locke, former athlete, now turned career coach, as we'll be learning all about the mindset of competing at the highest level, Rebecca's mission behind Locking Purpose, plus an exciting announcement, but we'll come on to that a little bit later.
This is Pitch Talks, bringing you the game.
So Rebecca, it's so good to welcome you onto Pitch Talks. How are you?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm really well. I'm delighted to be here. It's nice to meet Sam. We've not formally met before, so that's really nice.
Well, some say nice, some say. So, as I mentioned just a moment ago, your journey into sports started as competing at an elite level. Could you tell us what motivated you from an early age to want to get to that level and get into sport?
I don't think I had much of a choice. My mum was an international gymnast. My dad was an exceptional rugby player, and he is currently in the top 10 in the UK vets tennis player. So always been an amazing tennis player. So I didn't really have a choice in terms of what I was going to do as a kid. We just played sport, and we really just played. Like, all of our family holidays were kayaking down the Ardèche, jumping off cliffs, deep sea diving. Like, we just did crazy stuff as kids. And my dad was the head of sport at a very lovely prep school in Kent. So it was just kind of a given that I was going to be something to do with sport. But actually, I wasn't that good. I wasn't very coordinated. I always came 10th at cross country. I wasn't that good. In hindsight, I was at a very good prep school for sport, so it's a perspective thing. But one day when I was 8 years old, my PE teacher said to me, I want you to do the IM in a house swimming gala. And I was like, oh, but the IM is just reserved for the best swimmer. And he was like, yeah, I think you're a good swimmer. And I was like, okay. So I did it, and I won. And as soon as I won, that's all I wanted to do was win again. So I just had blinkers on from the age of 8, and just decided to do whatever I could do to just keep winning. Wasn't always very healthy, and my parents were tried to be as balanced as they could, but that's it really. It was just that kind of very extrinsic gold medal, I think.
Going more onto the challenges that you involved, both physically and mentally, sticking to a routine, how hard was that for such a long period of time?
Yeah, I think it's really different for different sports. And obviously I come from swimming, which is individual sport. It's very high time demanding, and it does require early specialization. So I really pushed it from my side. So my parents, like I said, were very balanced and didn't want me to start training before school too early. But at the age of 10, I was like, I want to go to morning training. So I was already pushing myself at that young age to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and train before I went to school. But my parents really did say, you're only going if you wake us up. So if you sleep and miss the alarm and don't go, you're not going to go. In that respect, it was very inwardly driven. I don't think I really cared through school. I think I've mentioned this before, but I never really felt that accepted at school. And I always felt like a bit of an outcast. I've got dyslexia and I really struggled academically. So swimming for me was the one thing that I felt really valued me. So when I was at school, because I was good at swimming, especially when you get into teenage years, it was very much well, she's the swimmer, so it's kind of cool that she can get up early and, maybe not go to whatever was happening in the evening because she's really good at swimming. So I kind of tried to make it into that. I mean, it's not the coolest sport, let's be honest, right? So I did battle that a bit. But I think even at university, I was just so focused on this is the only thing I wanted to do. I didn't really feel like I was ever missing out. But I didn't feel accepted and I didn't feel like cool and I didn't feel, but I don't know if I put that down to swimming. I just thought that was me. so I didn't really feel like I was sacrificing too much, I suppose, when I was later, for sure. Like as I went into my coaching career, for sure I did. And that was a much harder balance. But if I look back as a swimmer, I just kind of just did it. I just really wanted to do it.
Were there any sort of challenges? I know obviously you said that it was very intrinsically driven or extrinsically driven by the sort of the motivation to win. Were there ever any dark days or any real challenges that you faced with your mental health? Possibly that people that are going through something similar today, younger athletes that are just starting out, that are having to get up early to go to swimming and maybe finding it difficult to get that motivation. Was there anything that you did sort of think, what's this all for?
Yeah, I think I've been really, really open with my mental health on social media, and I have always struggled with my mental health since I was about 11 years old. I think back then we didn't label it as much and it wasn't talked about. So I just knew that I processed things differently, and rightly or wrongly, like we just had to do things a bit differently. And I think that was another reason why I saw myself as different. Like through my whole career as a swimmer, I never ever felt good enough. I never ever felt like I was achieving what I should achieve. And I always wanted the next thing. I grew up in Asia, so we moved abroad when I was 8. And I was like a big fish in a small sea over there. When I kind of finished my GCSEs, I really wanted to come back to the UK to swim and see what I could do in the UK. So I went to Millfield, which is a big private school dedicated really to elite sport. And like suddenly I was in a cohort of international juniors and I wasn't that good. I still trained 10 times a week every single week, but just really thinking I'm not good enough. I just can't do this. But I just genuinely loved the process. If I look back, I had more dark days than good days, probably, if I really look back at it. But I think, and this is where my passion for what I do now, all my identity was wrapped up so much in the sport. I didn't know where it was and where I was. So I never thought I'm not going to do this, because I couldn't see who I was without it. What I really hope young athletes can get from this is that it has to be about you as a person, not just the sport. And you have to understand that you are so much more than just the sport, because it is just sport and it doesn't feel like that. When you're in it, it feels like your whole world. But you are so much more than just a swimmer or a gymnast or a rower or a tennis player or a footballer. And I think that's where a lot of the work needs to be done, because any athlete at any age is going to leave their sport. It doesn't matter, Michael Phelps, who has 23 Olympic gold medals, which is just like mind blowing. He still wakes up every day now and has to find purpose in living, and struggles with his mental health because he doesn't know who and what that is. So that's, for me, is if you're a young athlete and you're struggling with, if it's motivation, God, think about what this year has been like for athletes, unreal, right? I would go back to that process. Like, what is it that first got you in there? What is it that you really, really love? Try and strip everything away, like all the noise, all of the success, and just get back to like enjoying it and play. And I think that's like one of the most important things you can do. But there's, that's such a massive topic, Sam. Probably talk for like hours on that.
You're listening to Pitch Talks, bringing you the game.
I'm glad you did just bring it up, because you could just see there the amount of passion that you have to support athletes going through a similar process to what you had in terms of redefining your goals. And that's one of the main reasons, obviously, that you set up Locke in purpose. From what you said, is that a lot of what you try and drive through to these younger athletes, or athletes who are now at the stage where unfortunately they have to come out of competing, but now trying to redefine, okay, what's next for me?
Yeah. Locke in purpose is really, really new, and there's kind of 3 main areas that I'm looking at, but some of them are real long term and haven't fully been defined, and I'm not really in that space yet, but that's kind of like the goal, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I'm working with athletes that are having to look at that next journey. And quite often we talk about plan B, which is just so wrong to say, because it is just life, right? It's just, there's always going to be life after sport. You know, it doesn't mean you're never going to be, you're not going to play recreationally or be an age group athlete, but to have it as your sole focus, you know, there is going to be other life. So for starters, I think we should never call it plan B, because it almost feels like, you know, plan A didn't work, right? So I have to go to plan B. So you didn't fail. It's just it's run its course. So yes, helping individuals transfer into their next journey and how that looks like and how to define it is mainly what Lock and Purpose is about. And that doesn't matter where you are in that spectrum. So you could be an age group athlete, a young athlete that is working with your support network, i.e. coaches and parents, on building yourself up as a person around sport, so that whenever that does happen and you need to leave it, you've got all the tools there. It could be the fact that you are an adult professional and you've got a career-ending injury, which I'm working with at the moment, which is horrendous because you don't, see it coming. Might just be that you've run its course. It could be due to, often athletes go through a lot of trauma in terms of not succeeding where they want to go, or having some of the more, we'll say, traditional sports have a bit of an archaic coaching pathway, and that can really damage athletes. So it's helping them understand the transition after that. But also elite coaches that, like me, I went straight from being an elite athlete to an elite coach, high performance coach. Really just you run it all in. There was never any transition into being a coach. And then got to 35 and was like, whoa, who am I? What am I doing? And having to go through that, like never sat in an office before, never gone to an interview, outside of a tracksuit setting, as they say. I hate that wording, but you know what I mean? All those little things that just kind of seem normal for some people are completely alien to us. So yeah, essentially Lock and Purpose is to kind of help all of those transitions and support individuals on that journey.
What I wanted to ask you about was the situation with Saracens rugby. They were hit very heavily with fines and points deductions last season, which meant they got relegated. But part of the reasoning that they were sort of going over their salary cap was because they were helping their players. They were helping the players have something outside of the playing side of rugby. So I think Brad Barrett's got his coffee brand that the club has helped set up. A number of them have got beer brands, and that have all been financially supported by the owner of Saracens, but also helped from a business point of view. It's a great model, and I think it should be being celebrated rather than penalised so heavily for it. And I'd support Wasps, so I no allegiance to Saracens at all. But I think the model of looking after the players outside of the sport is something that needs to be replicated across every single sport, because as you said, you don't know when you can get a career-ending injury.
Yeah. And I think it's shocking that, it's not talked about more. It's not part of their, especially professional athletes. They've got the time, and in spectator sports where they've got the resources and the funding, you could run that concurrently, along their athlete journey, and there's just no reason why that shouldn't be done. And I think some coaches think, it takes away from their focus, but I just disagree, because I think that if anything, it gives them a bit of an outlet. It gives them something else to focus on to stay fresh. And, they aren't just robots. Their lives don't end when they walk away from your pitch or from your program or your gym or whatever it is. And that, to me, we're doing a disservice to our athletes if we're not looking after them long term. They all deserve to have long, happy, purposeful lives. As coaches, you have such a massive responsibility for that. If we neglect it, we are just, I think we're damaging people. That's really where Lock and Purpose is born, and what I hope to change over time. It's not going to be easy. Yeah.
You're listening to Pitch Talks.
So far, we've learned about your development into establishing yourself at the top of your game, the physical and mental challenges, both in training and then moving away from the competitive side for you personally, and how it's, fueled your passion to empower other individuals after elite sport. But now I want to come on to something really special that I know we're all quite excited about, and that's PitchTALKS Collective. Can you share some of just the exciting stuff that we're going to be bringing to people looking to get into the sports industry?
Yeah, so I think PitchTALKS Collective was born obviously from this podcast, which is highlighting, careers in sport and the different ways you can get into it. I think it also is really important to highlight that there are so many different roles out there. I had no idea that there were so many different things you could do in this space. It's an unbelievably popular industry to get into, and everyone wants to get into sport. But there's this something about the glamour and the glitz, and really, if you strip it all back, it's still just a job. But there is something very special about working in sport, and we've seen over time that there's not enough information and education out there about how to get into it and where do you start, especially if you've not been an athlete or part of that life. And I think often hear people say, it's all right for you were a pro athlete, you've just kind of walked into this gig, right? Which happens a lot. 100% it does, but it's not always the way. And I think more light needs to be shed on that other side of who gets in, how they get in, why they get in, if they've not necessarily been athletes or in the trenches, on the front line. And I think so PitchTALKS Collective, because I've got a background in recruitment, and obviously, the work I do with Lock and Purpose is all around identifying what your transferable skills are, how does it relate to the industry, where can we place it, all of that sort of thing. It kind of just made sense, didn't it, to just put the two together. So we've got a group on LinkedIn where we highlight different roles that are coming up, interview hiring managers, find out what they are really looking for at the moment, get some real inside knowledge of what, is out there and what they really want. Because I think the other thing with sport is it's really fast paced. It's so progressive. It changes very quickly. And if you're not staying on top of it, you can really quickly fall behind. So that's the goal with it really. And just, if I can add any real life sort of tangible action points that people can take away to change CVs or applications or interview techniques, anything like that, then hopefully that's a platform that we will be able to impart some knowledge on.
I think actually that's a very valid point that you've just touched on at the end there about the application process. We've already done one interview with Baz Moffat from the Well HQ. And just in that short interview, we've already heard exactly what she looks for when people apply for the jobs, and this was just a digital marketing position. And she gave some real insight about if this is on the cover letter or this isn't on the cover letter, it goes straight in the bin. Because as you said, it is so competitive. You get so many different applications and people wanting these jobs. So what we're trying to do essentially is providing you, the applicant, with advice on how to make your application stand out, where you can get this work experience that recruiters are ultimately looking for, because that's the game now, isn't it? It's not so much if you've got the education, great. But when you look at the, the job ad, it's all about this experience, that experience. So getting that experience isn't exactly easy, is it? So we're now just trying to provide answers to, okay, well, where do I go next if I'm just looking to get an entry level position?
Yeah, I think it's also down to organizations as well. I think organizations will differ. I think there's certainly a big shift I've seen over, I would say, the last 6 months. I think there's been a big shift in terms of people being more open-minded towards transferable skills, attitude, work ethic, that type of thing over experience. I think that is happening, but you have to be able to articulate that, right? And if you can't, then that's where you'll struggle. I worked for Premiership Rugby on a role. It was an entry-level role, and we had both sides of the coin. We had really good experience and no experience, but very personal, very approachable, great soft skills. And they went with the less experienced. So I think I'm certainly seeing, especially with organisations, Premiership Rugby, actually, if you look at their team on the commercial side, really gender balanced. They've got a great, diverse setup there, which, they're really, really inclusive. And rugby, if, I might get shot down here, but that's okay. If you look at it as a whole, you see it as it's one of our British sports, right? A little bit middle class, male dominant, right? So it's really nice to see there are some companies that are changing and seeing it. And I think we are moving in the right direction. Of course, any experience is going to help, but you've got to start somewhere. And I think more and more people are taking chances on the right people, but it's being able to articulate it, like I said. And that's where people can help that have seen thousands of CVs. That's where you can help, like, get it onto paper. And you just have to ask, like, absolutely just ask me, because I'm more than happy to help with that type of thing.
I think what's great about what we're trying to do as well is between all three of us, we've got three very, very different routes of where we got to where we are and where we want to get to. Rebecca, obviously, as we mentioned, you've got your performing side. You've then got my side of, I did go to university, I did business and marketing, and now I'm looking for a way into sport. So I haven't got that sports experience. Whereas Sam, I'm going to come to you because obviously you did your degree, which you can explain briefly in a moment. But then also you landed your job out of university into England handball. Unfortunately, obviously with government cuts, you lost that role in handball, which again, you can come on to. But now you're obviously looking for your way back into the industry. And it's by no means easy that way, having that experience already.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I went into the role that Mitch is talking about with England handball, I was quite lucky in the fact that they were, again, willing to take the chance on someone that I had no experience. I was still at university when I was interviewing for the role. I had no expectation that I was even going to get an interview when I put the application in. I had no expectation that I was going to get the job when I went to the interview, which I think helped because I was just sort of like, well, let's just use this as practice sort of thing. So I studied sports management and coaching at university, and part of the offer that was available at Buxton University in High Wycombe was none of the sports you had to pay a membership for. So it was all paid for you. You all had, whereas a lot of other universities that I've spoken to people that have gone elsewhere, you had to pay a yearly subscription to each sports club that you wanted to be a member of, which when you're a student, okay, yeah, you're getting a big old lump sum. If you're in my situation, you're getting a big old lump sum from the government. That's got to pay for rent and food. To have to shell out on top of that just to go to a membership was something that was quite shocking to me, really, because I was able to be a member of the rugby club, the football club, the cricket club, and then actually set up the handball club through university. And because of the fact that I'd been able to do all of that and the handball club on the side was what they saw, and they went, well, you've got experience of actually selling handball or not selling handball, but trying to get people involved in handball from a university point of view. You've got that little bit of experience of having to do it, so we're going to take a chance on you. Unfortunately, the contract wasn't renewed, and it came to sort of the end of the 10 months and there was nothing out there. Kind of felt like I didn't really have any experience when I'm there now, then applying for more roles, and they're asking for 3-5 years of experience. I don't have that, and I've got no way of learning that or getting that experience unless I go back down the sort of feels like I'm taking a step back, which is sort of why I'm now in IT pre-sales, completely out of sport, full stop.
I think that nicely articulates then, your background and how, there might be other people that have had a similar opportunity, unfortunately fell out the system through no fault of their own, but are still looking for their way in. So I think that's the kind of messages that you'll get as part of PitchTALKS Collective. You'll get all these different insights. And like you said, Rebecca, if people have questions, then to certainly post them on there and you'll try and guide them where you can. So if people are certainly interested in getting involved in that, then make sure you head to LinkedIn and search PitchTALKS Collective. It's open to everyone. So make sure you join.
This is PitchTALKS.
I have a final question, and it's probably almost in 3 parts in terms of the advice that you can provide the different people that might listen to this episode. So, the advice that you'd offer aspiring athletes, advice that, you provide as part of your day job, as we did just mention there in terms of the mental health side of things, but then also advice that you'd encourage people looking to break into the sports industry as a working professional. Where would you begin, or what would be the first lesson that you would say to them? Again, I appreciate that's kind of, you cover so many different cylinders. So where would you begin?
I think if you're an aspiring athlete, I think my biggest advice to you would be follow your heart and follow your dreams. Like if someone is telling you you're not good enough, if you genuinely love it, doesn't matter if you're not good enough, just go out and do it because you love it, and if you make it, whatever make it means, great. If you don't, it's not wasted. You've loved it. You'll have so many amazing experiences. Just go after it. My other advice would be, depending on what sport you play, don't go after a team because of the coach, because the coach will always leave. So go after where you are and where you train because it fits with your lifestyle. You love the culture of the team, but a coach will leave you. You will always have a relationship with that coach, when they move on, but you have to be in a sport for you and not your coach. I think those are the two biggest things I could probably give as an advice for athletes. In terms of mental health, keeping ourselves well just needs to be talked about more, as just, like what I said, like everyone says, have 5 vegetables and fruits a day, which probably should be 10, and do, a minimum of half an hour exercise. And make sure that you're doing self-care, make sure you're doing some form of affirmation, some gratitude, make sure you're getting out in nature at least every day, even if it's talking to your houseplant. Green is a calming color. It doesn't, those types of things have to be talked about as what we do every day to look after ourselves, our mental wellness as well as our physical wellness. And that for me is like one of the, it's probably the most important thing that you can do with your physical health as well, because if you don't look after your mental and physical health, you can't do anything. You can't play sport, you can't go to work, you can't be there for your partner, your family, whatever it is. So that has to be your number one focus. Thirdly, if you're trying to get into the sports industry, I guess it depends which side you're going for. Are you going for the practitioner route or are you going for the commercial side? My advice, if you're going to the commercial side, is be really targeted and specific on the roles you're going to go for. Quite often recruiters will see the same person applying for everything, and that just means they have no idea what they want to do. They don't know the direction. They're just, we call it spraying and praying. So you don't want to do that. Okay. So really specific, make sure it's directed. Follow your applications up with a phone call. If it looks like it's a career pivot and the recruiter would be like, why do you want to do this? Call them up and just say, just want to give you 3 reasons why I've applied for this and why I think I'd be great. A voice is so much easier to remember than a name on a CV when you see thousands of them. So that's what my advice would be on that side. For your practitioner, experience is everything. If you can't gain it, volunteer. Use your social media as much as you can to connect to the people that you want to work with. And even if it's just having conversations with them, the more you have conversations, the more things open up. And you'll find yourself getting lucky. For sure. Yeah.
Rebecca, we've really enjoyed talking with you today. It's been great to hear your pathway as an athlete and how it's led you becoming a career coach and now advising people to how to improve mental health. And also then just another reminder that if you want to be involved with the Pitch Talks Collective, then head over to our LinkedIn page. So all that leaves me to say is thank you to you, Rebecca, for being part of the podcast today.
Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
And if you've enjoyed the episode, make sure to leave us a review on our Apple Podcast channel, or also give us a listen across other popular podcast platforms. And you can also follow our social channels for upcoming announcements. This has been Pitch Talks, the sports career podcast focused on helping you get into sport.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Bringing You the Game by PitchTALKS. For more information on our latest episodes, careers advice, or to even get involved as a guest, get in touch with the team at mitch@pitch-talks.com or send us a message on any of our social platforms. Thanks for tuning in. Bringing you the game. All Pitch Talk content is copyright protected. Pitch Talks.